Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Go Big or Go Home Football Edition. I am Old Man Troy, joined by Lock It Up, youngster Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. You know why I did that, youngster. You know exactly why.
Yeah, I think we're pretty good at this lock of the week thing, Troy. We have done 4 picks now. This is not a season-long thing. We've only been doing this podcast since January, and so this is our first college football season together as far as doing a weekly show regarding the Big Ten, and we've only done 4 locks of the week. I mean, we've only done this for 5 weeks now. I know there was a week in there that we didn't have a lock of the week, so we're not pushing it. We're not pressing it, especially since we're not exactly using our money on these quote-unquote locks of the week. At least I'm not. I guess I can't tell for sure with you, Troy. But regardless, we have picked.
I use my Monopoly money.
Okay.
Right, yeah, so I use Monopoly money, and I'm way ahead.
Yeah, we're pass and go quite often with these picks.
I'm ready to buy Boardwalk. I can buy Boardwalk straight up with our locks of the week.
Yeah, we're 4-0. 4 for 4, 4-0. That's not losing money. I mean, if we lost the next 3 and you're betting accordingly, I mean, the same amount of money each week, you'd still be up money if you're going with our locks of the week. So you got a while to lose to keep going with our locks of the week. If you want to end up losing money, that's not going to happen. I mean, we're batting 100% here, batting 1,000. I guess not batting 100%. That's incorrect. But 4 for 4. As of this past weekend, we picked Northwestern to beat Purdue. Northwestern was at home. They were favored by like 4.5, something like that. And we said, no, Northwestern's the better team. They're at home. They should be favored by probably a touchdown. They should win this game by a touchdown. And they won by 10. So we are 4-0 in our locks of the week. And I won't say I couldn't be prouder of us, but we are killing it in Vegas or Monopoly, as you like to put it, Troy.
We certainly are. But enough about tooting our own horn. You know, we're kind of good at what we do. Glad people listen in. I do want to thank all the listeners. Kevin and I, we look at the numbers. We go in, look at the website, thegruelingtruth.net. I want to thank all the listeners because without you, we wouldn't be able to do a podcast. You know, Kevin, because Coach Goodpasture would probably say, that Go Big show not working so well. But thanks to you guys that listen in, we do appreciate it. Sometimes we get a little bit long-winded. Sometimes we get off topic. But we do see that we get listeners, and we appreciate every single one of you. You should find us on Twitter, TroyRobert967, at KidCunny, KIDCUNI, or even better, Kevin and I do a number of shows. We have actually our own Twitter page for talking sports, and our Twitter handle is at youngsteroldman, one word, so easy. Just youngsteroldman. Find us there. We love to interact. I know, Kevin, you and I were on Twitter a little bit last night with Michigan State Duke. We're not talking basketball. We have our own basketball Go Big show, which is actually posted this morning in the wee hours of the morning on thegruelingtruth.net. So go check that out if you're a basketball fan. We're excited about doing a weekly show just for basketball, at least until football is done. I'll tell you what, though, Kevin, it's funny. I text you, ready when you are to do this show, and it's fitting that this song came on right when I text this to you. Another One Bites the Dust came on the radio. And as far as the college football rankings go, a couple bit the dust last week. And for those teams that were below 5, couldn't have asked for a better happening because it allowed some teams to move up. And the Wisconsin Badgers, they moved into position a lot better than where they were last week. And now you can almost say if they win out, they're probably going to be in the playoff. That wasn't so certain last week. Even if they won out, if you remember, I said they could win out and still not make it. They would need some things to happen. And a couple of those things already happened this week, and we still have a number of weeks to go. But I'll tell you what, Kevin, it was an exciting weekend in college football. I'm an underdog guy. I always cheer for the underdogs, and boom, there it was, right there on the TV, right as I'm watching. There are the upsets and I couldn't have asked for more on a Saturday afternoon and evening. What about you? How'd you like the weekend of college football?
I loved it. I saw my Ohio State Buckeyes, I say my just because I root for the team, beat Michigan State by 45 points. That was a nice way to start the college football weekend for me. And then Wisconsin just keeps pummeling teams and doing their thing. And again, I want to see Ohio State win the whole thing. That's where my rooting interest lies. I want to see the Big Ten as a whole do well. Since before the year started, I called this conference the best conference in the country.
I am going to preface this while you're talking, though. You talk about Wisconsin pummeling teams. It's kind of funny, though. I got to share with the listeners. Those that are listening every week know that I'm a Badger fan. Those that are listening for the first time, I hail from the state of Wisconsin, born in Green Bay, so I am a Wisconsin fan. During that game, Kevin, even you, I think you bought into my what's wrong with Hornibrook. I mean, seriously, you text me like 3 times. I think one of the texts was, oh, my God, Hornibrook. I think that was one of your texts. I can't remember exactly. But that's why they've not had the love, because they don't have good quarterback play. You even text me during that game about Mr. Hornibrook. So I had to throw that in there.
No, yeah, for sure. I shouldn't have used the word pummeling. That's incorrect. But this team does what they want to teams, and that's just shut them down defensively. That's run the ball effectively. It's not even as though Jonathan Taylor is averaging, 7, 8, 9 yards a carry anymore. I mean, he had 29 carries, which is a ton against Iowa. Picked up 157 yards, which is a lot. But, again, getting basically 30 carries, a little over 5 per carry there. He's not completely dominating, but as the game goes on, as that defense holds, it's tough to beat Wisconsin when Wisconsin is able to run the football. And outside of a couple plays by Mr. Hornibrook, which resulted in 14 points thanks to Joshua Jackson of Iowa, I mean, you take those 2 and you can't just say, oh, hey, take these 2 pick sixes away. But if you did, and, say one of them ends in a touchdown, say neither of them end in any points for Wisconsin, and say that defense just holds Iowa put. I mean, that's all Iowa scored on Wisconsin was 2 pick sixes by the same guy. So you can't say just throw these out and look, it's a 38-0 score. But, I mean, even throw those out, you could add some points to those possessions. Say they don't end in pick sixes. Say they end in points for Wisconsin. It could have been even uglier. But 38-14 final score there. Again, you can't say Wisconsin's pummeling teams left and right, but they are getting the job done. They're winning the way they want to every single week. I don't think Hornibrook has had to have thrown 30 passes in a game so far this year, just off the top of my head. I can't think of it.
And what did I say to you in the text message? Do you remember about Mr. Hornibrook and his number of attempts?
That's the exact point I was going to bring up. He only had to throw it 18 times. You said if he threw it more than 20, Wisconsin would lose. I have a feeling if he would have attempted 2 more passes, they would have been fine with this final score. But the point being, obviously, you make it that if Hornibrook has to throw it a lot, Wisconsin's not doing well in the game. And if you have to rely on Hornibrook as opposed to Taylor in that running game, good luck. If you're the Badgers, they haven't had to face that yet. And maybe they will this week against Michigan.
Yeah, they very well could. I didn't mean to get into breaking down that Wisconsin game, but it's just funny because we interacted a lot during that game, and we threw a lot of things out there that are so true about the Badgers. But good for the Badgers. Moved up to number 5 in the college football ranking. That's how we're going to start the show like we do every week. Youngster, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Go right down. I am going to actually, believe it or not, I am not going to interrupt you during the top 10, or if you want to go farther than the top 10, that's fine. I'm not going to interrupt you. And you know why? Because last week when we were doing this show, when I interrupted you, I missed my turn to go home. And I told you before, I could ill afford to miss any turns today as I forgot my wallet at home. And I'm pretty close to the E mark with about 43 miles left to go home. So I'm just going to concentrate on making sure I hit the right turn and let you get through the top 10. How does that sound?
That sounds unbelievable. Hallelujah. I'm just kidding. I like when you interrupt me because typically you have a good point to make, and I can piggyback off it, and that's why sometimes the show takes a little longer than we intended to. But regardless, University of Alabama, number 1 in the country, as where most people probably thought they were, regardless of whether Georgia held that spot for a couple weeks. This is the 3rd week that the College Football Playoff Committee is putting on these rankings. Got a few more to go, but Alabama's 1. This is where I guess it gets somewhat controversial, if you want to call it controversial. Again, you've got another 3 or so weeks left in the season, another 3-4 weeks of these rankings before it actually does matter and the Final Four is set. So take with a grain of salt if you're number 2 instead of number 3, or you're number 4 instead of number 2 like you think you should be. There's plenty of football to be played. Plenty of statement games are out there left to be played to rise in these rankings, or fall accordingly if you're not beating great teams. And other teams are beating great teams that are right behind you. But Alabama 1, Clemson 2, Miami 3, Oklahoma 4. Those would be the 4 right now. You would have, the top team in the SEC, top in the Big 12, 2 from the ACC. Big 10 and Pac-12 left out. I think the Pac-12 is going to get left out regardless. Could have guessed that a while ago. Didn't have to wait till this week to guess that one. But Washington suffered their second defeat. I believe it was to Stanford. I could be mistaken there, but I think Washington lost to Stanford on Friday. I think it was this past weekend. But Washington has 2 losses. USC has 2 losses. USC is at number 11. That's the top Pac-12 team now. I mean, they're not going to have that huge signature win that an Ohio State could have at the end of the year, or Wisconsin at the end of the year, to kind of vault them up, maybe pass a team or 2 if they needed to get in the top 4. Pac-12 is pretty much screwed. And Notre Dame also lost their second game. Their best game from this point on, I believe, is Stanford, and Stanford's 22. So Notre Dame is 8 right now, and they're not going to have a ton of shots at jumping over teams because, again, your best game, I think they play Navy this week. I think they've got one more game before Stanford, but I think it's Navy, one random game, and then Stanford. So Notre Dame's not going to be jumping teams left and right. The teams ahead of them absolutely have to lose if they want to jump teams, which Auburn, Georgia certainly could. I'll finally get through this top 10. But Alabama, Clemson, Miami, Oklahoma, 1 through 4. And then you've got Wisconsin at 5, like Troy mentioned. Auburn, 6. Georgia, 7. Georgia lost to Auburn. Auburn's number 6. Georgia, number 7. The committee's held fairly true to that if Ohio State loses to Oklahoma, they're a spot behind. Or if Ohio State beats Penn State, they're a spot ahead. And that's how it is. Again, Auburn 6, Georgia 7, Notre Dame 8, Ohio State 9, Penn State 10. Like I mentioned before, USC is 11. You've got TCU, Oklahoma State behind them, Washington State, and I guess you've got 3 2-loss Pac-12 teams. I forgot about Washington State. But basically Pac-12 screwed. The top 10 has a shot, in my opinion. If Ohio State were to lose, assumably to Michigan, in the final week of the regular season, then Penn State could be representing the Big Ten in the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin, and so Penn State could maybe have a signature victory if chaos ensues ahead of them to vault into the top 4. I don't think that's likely whatsoever. But I think the road is almost fairly clear for Ohio State, which, again, as a Buckeyes fan, I'm pretty happy with how these rankings turned out. It looks like that basically as long as Alabama wins out, then it seems almost likely that Ohio State gets into the college football playoff, assuming they beat Wisconsin. Because you would have Wisconsin suffering a loss. You would have either Clemson or Miami suffering a loss, which are 2 of the top 3 teams. So you can knock 2 of the top 5 out right there. You'd have Alabama and Oklahoma moving on. You'd obviously have the winner of Clemson and Miami moving on. Those 3 could be locks for Ohio State. But then again, you're dropping out either Clemson, Miami. You're dropping out Wisconsin, assuming Ohio State wins that game. You're dropping out Auburn, assuming Alabama beats them. You're dropping out Georgia, assuming Alabama beats them. And then the only other team is Notre Dame, which, again, Ohio State has Michigan left. Ohio State has unbeaten Wisconsin left, potentially. So Ohio State's going to jump Notre Dame. At the end of the year, if you're looking and Notre Dame's playing nobody the conference championship weekend and Ohio State beats an undefeated Wisconsin, absolutely Ohio State's going to jump Notre Dame, which is one spot ahead of them at this point. So to me, in my opinion, Wisconsin, if they win out, they're in. Ohio State, if they win out and Alabama can take care of both Auburn and Georgia, then to me, Ohio State should be in. And that's not even assuming chaos happens in the ACC with Clemson and Miami. Say one of them slips up randomly. Say Oklahoma loses to TCU in a rematch in the Big 12 title game. That could absolutely happen. But even if Alabama, say Clemson, and Oklahoma win out, you could have Miami fall due to losing to Clemson, Wisconsin falling, losing to Ohio State, and then Auburn and Georgia losing to Alabama. So it seems pretty clear the road for Ohio State, even though they're at number 9 with just a few weeks left. Some of these teams absolutely have to drop in the next few weeks. And again, Ohio State, their last impression on the committee would be beating an undefeated Wisconsin team, which should be in the top 5 of the rankings at the time, if not higher.
Yeah, well, you can't just count all the chickens and say that Wisconsin will be there. They got a tough game. We're going to preview that game a little later against Michigan. They get by Michigan, it should be undefeated into the championship game for Wisconsin. But Michigan seems to have picked it up defensively here lately. We'll talk about that again later in the show. But I'll tell you, Kevin, if people wanted to ever say, well, the college football ranking is biased, and there's always going to be debate. You mentioned one phrase earlier. They've been pretty consistent. If you remember, Kevin, I think it was like maybe the second or third week the wonderful AP poll came out that I pay so much attention to that, yeah, you chuckle because you know I'm being a little sarcastic there. Yeah, you said they've been consistent, and I agree with you. I have not really had any problem with the football committee this year. You know, when I look at it, you know, I know people last week when Wisconsin was 8, they're like, oh, my God, how can Wisconsin? I'm looking at it going, thank you very much, because I just talked about it before, being realistic about quarterback play. You look at, and let's throw a scenario out here, Kevin. You look, let's take, well, let me just throw this out there. Clemson, Miami, they got to play in the ACC championship game. Who do you think wins that game, Kevin?
I'd say Clemson.
All right, so throw Miami out, Wisconsin in. So you're going to throw Wisconsin in at 4 against Alabama. Do I think they could have a fighter's chance against Alabama? Maybe against Alabama, because they can maybe try to run the ball. But it would be tough because you're going to have to put it into Hornibrook's hands. Alabama's not that team that's scorching teams. Let's say for some reason they would win that game. And then you've got, Clemson and Oklahoma? No way offensively can Wisconsin hold up against either one of them. No way in the world. Both those teams, I mean, you talked about it, that good offense is going to be great defense in the NCAA, and I agree with you. Doesn't matter how good this Wisconsin defense is. It's actually turning out, Kevin, I mean, I thought they were great. I think they're super great. I mean, what they did against Iowa, like you said, throw the pick sixes out, they had their way with that Iowa offense. They're super great. But when you're playing good NCAA offenses, the defense has to give at some point. And that's the concern, and that's where the committee's coming from. I think the committee has this right on. I don't think they've made a mistake. I mean, people can say, well, you got to flip-flop here and here, but I don't see any glaring weakness or any glaring discrepancies from this committee this year so far. Like you said, there's still a couple weeks left. But so far, this show, you have not heard me bitch and moan about the committee. I think that, you know, every once in a while, slot here or slot here, but I think they've done a pretty good job so far, and I'll applaud them, because that was my only concern. You got human bias, and where's the bias can come in at some point? For bias,
I think Troy dropped out of his call there. But regardless, like he was basically going to say, that talking about the biases that inevitably have to come up, because you have, again, I mean, I can be as critical on Ohio State football as I can be, or Duke basketball, or the Tennessee Titans in the NFL. I'm realistic, and I'm not going to say that Ohio State's the best team in the country because of this, or the Titans are going to win the Super Bowl because of that. I'm a realistic person. At least I like to think I am. But in general, I mean, say there's bias, say there's not with these college football playoff rankings. Just 1 week to the next. I mean, if a team loses and they deserve to fall a certain number of spots, it seems like they have been in these first few college football playoff rankings. That's just the way it has been. But so, you're not seeing this love for the SEC. You're not seeing this love for the Big Ten. I guess that was going to be my next point before we kind of recap games from this past week in the Big Ten, was that, again, I think this kind of proves to me, and I think the College Football Playoff Committee feels the same, that the Big Ten is the best conference in the country. You can have 3 really good SEC teams near the top in Alabama, Auburn, and Georgia, 3 of the top 7, according to the committee right now, but you also have 3 of the top 10 in the Big Ten. So there's not much of a difference there. You can say the SEC has one juggernaut, so to say, in Alabama, but a lot of people even now think Auburn's going to win that football game a couple weeks from now. But you start looking, outside of those top 3 from the SEC. Mississippi State is at 16, so that's interesting for the SEC. LSU at 20. I guess that's another. But so you've got a couple middle of the road SEC teams in this top 25, but for the Big Ten, again, you've got 3 of the top 10. That's not far behind the SEC, having 3 of the top 7. And then just going down the line, you've got Michigan State to match Mississippi State, 17-16. You have LSU at 20, but you also have Northwestern and Michigan at 23-24. I think there is much more depth in the Big Ten. And Iowa, you saw, who's not even ranked in this week's rankings because they got crushed by Wisconsin. But Iowa has the potential to beat Ohio State by 30 points, and they're not even in this top 25. So I think the committee believes that the Big Ten is pretty damn strong. They think the SEC is pretty damn strong as well. But so I think in general, I mean, the winner of that Wisconsin-Ohio State game, assuming they both win out to that point, I think they both have a pretty good shot at making it. Again, some craziness can happen where, say, Alabama loses to Auburn, and you have to see it would be Auburn playing Georgia at that point. How much would you drop Alabama losing to Auburn right now? Number 1 losing to number 6. Where does Alabama go with just 1 loss? 4, 5, even say they slide to 6. Still, that's a 1-loss Alabama team. You're going to slide them all the way down, and then still you've got the SEC championship game, which at that point would be Auburn, Georgia. That's 2 top 7 teams at that point for sure. So the winner of that moves on. How much would you slide down a loser of that in the SEC title game if Alabama runs the table and plays Georgia? Say Georgia wins the game. You have to put a 1-loss Georgia in after beating the number 1 team in the country. And again, how much do you ding Alabama for losing to Georgia, who only has 1 loss and is the king of the SEC at that point? Then that's where craziness can happen for Ohio State. I think Wisconsin, if they beat Ohio State, they go 13-0. It's almost impossible to keep them out. But Alabama, Georgia, could both of those teams make it in the worst possible scenario for Ohio State? I think they could. But I think it's good in general that you're seeing all these teams in the top 10 for the Big Ten and the top 25 as a whole. Again, you've got 3 in the top 10, 4 in the top 17, I guess, if you want to call it that way, but 6 of the top 25 with Northwestern and Michigan toward the back end. So bodes well for Ohio State. Again, potentially Penn State, if Ohio State were to lose and Penn State gets to play Wisconsin, and say Penn State wins that game by 25 points, then who knows with what happens in front of them, how much love Penn State would get there for that big win. But I think for Ohio State, the coast is fairly clear in terms of what needs to happen. And as long as Alabama keeps winning, that's actually a good thing for Ohio State because it just knocks out teams in front of them. That's
I'll tell you what, youngster, two losses, normally 2 losses and you don't even sniff the playoff.
Yeah.
This year with all the chaos, 2 losses, we might see a 2-loss team. Like you said, there could be a 2-loss team that does find their way in there should other things happen. I think it would have to be nearly perfection for those things to happen. But like you said, if Ohio State wins out and some things and those perfect things happen, how do you keep them out at that point, especially if Wisconsin wins out? Now, as an Ohio State fan, I would imagine that you are now cheering for Bucky Badger to win out because if they lose and it's Ohio State against Wisconsin with 1-loss Wisconsin, that's not going to help them because Wisconsin will have pummeled after that point, actually probably fallen behind Ohio State. So that win, if it was Ohio State, Wisconsin with a 1 loss, it's still a good win, but it's not that super win against an unbeaten, and it may actually hurt Ohio State at that point.
Yeah, for sure. If you're Ohio State, and I've thought this all year long, I want Wisconsin to be undefeated because that's the best shot at Ohio State getting a huge win at the end of the year is if Wisconsin's unbeaten. I've known that since week 1. If you're going to have any team toward the top of the college football playoff rankings at the end of the year from the other division, it's Wisconsin. So I've been rooting for Wisconsin to win every single game. I'm sure my friends in Wisconsin are happy about that. But regardless, Ohio State wants Wisconsin to keep winning. And most importantly, again, it's not as though all these stars have to align. As long as Alabama takes care of Georgia and Auburn, then Ohio State just needs to keep winning. And then I think they will find themselves in the top 4. Alabama takes care of business. Ohio State, just keep winning. You'll be in. That's my take from this week's rankings.
Well, let's move on to previewing or actually recapping last weekend's game because I know that my call dropped, and I'm not sure where the listeners heard me fall out of the conversation. But it was another great weekend in the Big Ten. I got back on the call listening to you talk about the depth of the Big Ten, and we're seeing it. I mean, you look at that division, Kevin, you got Ohio State up there at the top, but then you got 3 teams at 5-2. Michigan and Michigan State, the surprise to me, at 5-2, and then Penn State. Penn State, Michigan being there, that's not so much a surprise. But Michigan State at 5-2 in that division, that's a surprise. Northwestern has worked their way back up to second place behind Wisconsin. That's where we kind of thought they might be. So now you're starting to see, I just mentioned 4 teams outside of Ohio State and Wisconsin that are very good teams, that could hold their own in almost any other conference. And you look at some of the other teams that are sitting there lingering around. This Big Ten conference every Saturday is exciting, and just got to love Big Ten football. Let's move into it. Let's recap last weekend, Kevin.
I want to make this point first, that I was 3-4 in Big Ten play, and that includes a 31-point win over Ohio State. I mean, if you're 3-4 in the Big Ten and you take out the 30-point win, you're 2-4 outside of Ohio State. A 2-4 Big Ten team can beat Ohio State by 31 points. I think that speaks to how good the Big Ten is. You're not seeing a 2-4 SEC team have the opportunity of beating Alabama by 30 points. That's not happening. So the gap between the top and the middle in the SEC is much wider and much greater than it is in the Big Ten. I think that speaks to the greatness of the Big Ten, that maybe you don't have that absolute juggernaut in Alabama, although, again, like I said before, a lot of people are hopping on Auburn's bandwagon to beat Alabama a couple weeks from now. But regardless, I think the Big Ten is still the best team, best conference in the country. I've said that since before the year started. I've said that, I think, since the end of last season. But regardless, recapping last week, we can start with Wisconsin-Iowa since we somewhat already did it. But Again, Nathan Stanley threw 5 touchdown passes against Ohio State 2 weeks ago, and then he plays Wisconsin, and he goes 8 of 24 for 41 yards, averaging less than 2 yards an attempt. 1 interception, no touchdowns, obviously. Again, Iowa's 14 points came from 2 pick sixes by the same player. James Butler, Akrum Wadley, their top 2 backs that kind of share the backfield, combined 16 carries, 53 yards. They did nothing. I mean, as a whole, Wisconsin's defense just absolutely crushed Iowa. And again, Hornibrook, he goes 11 of 18, throws 2 pick sixes, and they still win by 24 points.
Amazing.
382 total yards to 66. There's not much more to say on that game.
No, the only stat I want you to bring up for the fans, time of possession, please.
I think Wisconsin actually leads time of possession in the country now. I might be mistaken there, but I think I heard that earlier today. But 38 minutes, over 38 minutes to under 22 for Iowa. It was 38-27 to 21-33. So huge advantage.
And you mentioned it earlier when we talked about, and you used the word pummel. And you said maybe it's not the right word. I'll say it is the right word, Kevin, because they pummel you and they beat you mentally and physically. When you have the ball for nearly 40 minutes, that's almost 3 quarters. That's almost 3 quarters of the game that they have the ball. If I'm a defensive player, I'm like, how the hell do they get off the field? You got to get them in down and distance, and the problem is that big, burly offensive line. And again, you saw it even against Iowa, a little sluggish start against Iowa. And then as the game wears on and you get first downs and you move the chains and you move the chains and you move the chains and then you got 3rd and 3 and you don't have a 3rd and 13, what do you do? Because Hornibrook, like I said, Kevin, intermediate passes, short passes, he's okay. I mean, you said 11 for 18. He's just not going to stretch the field. And then he makes just crazy throws. I'm not going to call them boneheaded. They're just crazy throws. Like, really? You just threw that. Where are you throwing it to? I said it 2 weeks ago, man on the moon. Or you're throwing it to the other player, and they're going to the end zone. So when he tries to force things and he tries to make things happen, that's when there's bad things that happen for the Badgers. But I thought this week the important stat was how they dominated the time of possession once again. Because that is the Wisconsin way. That's exactly what they're going to do to you. And again, Kevin, though, I look at this season, and I don't even think that I'm surprised. You and I talked about Wisconsin's schedule. They should be doing exactly what they've been doing. They should be at this point right now. We circled the game against Michigan a couple weeks ago. Michigan wasn't playing so well, and that's when I wished Wisconsin could have played them. Now I'm back to a little bit of nervousness against this Michigan team. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but this game, not a lot to talk about. I mean, I can talk more in depth because I'm a Badger fan and watched a lot of it. But this was one of those games, Kevin, do you ever get this? Like you, I want to watch every snap. But there's just some games that get boring when your team is actually dominating so much. That's what happened with me with Wisconsin, Iowa. It's like, really? Come on. Can you give me some adversity in this game outside of those 2 pick sixes for me to talk about on the show? The game to me was actually boring. And that's a Badger fan watching the Badgers. The game is boring because your defense is way too good against that Iowa offense. It was like a man amongst children. They couldn't do anything, Kevin. But as a Badger fan, I had to love it. But it got boring to me. It's like, really? Okay. Yeah, they're going to get a stop. They're going to have to punt the ball. Here we go. All right, they're going to hand the ball to Taylor 29 times. They're going to hand the ball off. That was the game, and it was kind of boring, but that's Wisconsin football. I don't want to say it's boring. It's methodical, and it shows with time of possession. That's all I had to add about that game.
Again, as an Ohio State fan, I wish I could say the same thing about Ohio State and its defense against Iowa because that certainly was not the case. But I will move on to Ohio State's dominating performance against Michigan State. They won that game 48-3. They were 35. Yeah, 35 at half. That was the worst loss in, I believe it was D'Antonio's history at Michigan State, and understandably so. I mean, losing
fire D'Antonio. Got to fire him now. Got to fire him.
That's what the haters have been saying, except until Michigan State gets to number 12 in the country, and then everyone wants to ride his coattails again. But then, of course, this happens, and you wonder what Michigan State fans think. But we've said it all year long that this team, they could maybe, again, not even make a bowl game like they did a year ago, but up until the last, or I guess this game in particular, they had played extremely well, and they're a very young team, and I think it showed against, again, I mentioned it a week ago, that everything from the neck up played into Ohio State's favor. You're having to prove something if you're Ohio State. You're having to prove that you're not even just the best team in your own division, let alone conference, but you got embarrassed against Iowa by 30 points. Now you have the number 12 team coming into your place. People see you as the number 13 team. So what are you going to do to this team that is better than you, quote unquote? And they responded with a 45-point win. So I think that Ohio State, when they played their best football, I seriously do think they are the best team in the country. But they may not even make the college football playoff. And again, I root for Ohio State. I've said it a number of times on this show already. I'm tired of saying it. But if they don't make it, understandably so. They realistically don't deserve to make it. To lose against Iowa by 30 points and to get clearly beaten by Oklahoma at the start of the year, to me, they don't deserve to make it, but the stars are kind of aligning for them to make it if they take care of their own business, which, again, like I've said all year long, I do expect Ohio State to beat Wisconsin in that Big Ten title game. We'll obviously talk about that down the road when it probably happens, but I think that Ohio State, when they play their best football and they care and they come up prepared for a game, like against Penn State, even though, again, take out the first 5 minutes of that game, they destroy Penn State. You can't take out any certain amount of time against Iowa. Iowa just crushed them. I mean, it was 17-17, I guess, and then Iowa went on that ridiculous run. But regardless, Ohio State just got trounced when it mattered most in that game. But if Ohio State cares, they can crush teams like Penn State. They can crush teams like Michigan State. Not to say that they're going to crush Wisconsin, because I don't think they do. But I think they do win it by 10, 14, 17 points, somewhere in there is what I would guess. I don't think that's where Vegas should put the line. But I think that Ohio State would go into that game caring. And I think that Ohio State, again, is probably the best team in the country when they care. But they haven't been consistent enough this year. So do they deserve to be in the college football playoff? I don't think they do. I really don't. But get the best of Ohio State, you're seeing the best team in the country, in my opinion. I think they've proved that against Penn State outside of the first 5 minutes, and they proved it against Michigan State the entire 60 minutes a week ago. So in short, I mean, again, 48-3, JT Barrett only had to complete 14 passes in this game. Mike Weber had 9 carries for 162 yards on the ground. J.K. Dobbins added another 120. Ohio State did whatever they wanted to in this game. Whether it was pass it deep down the field, J.T. Barrett even had a couple interceptions, and they still won the game by 45 points. So
amazing, Kevin, how we talk about quarterback play. But when we start looking at dominating performances, not just in the Big Ten, but across the country, it's those teams that can dominate in the trenches offensively and defensively that are winning games big and allowing their quarterback not to have to do anything. I just bring that up because I'm an old school guy. And at the end of the day, if you don't have dominant line play on both sides of the ball, you're not going to be a great team. I mean, J.T. Barrett has gotten better over the course of the year in my mind, but just like Wisconsin, and you can agree or disagree with me here, youngster, the less you have to put the ball in Barrett's hands to throw and make plays, the better off Ohio State might be.
No, yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. I think that there has been I saw this little graphic a couple weeks ago where if J.T. Barrett has to run it more than Ohio State running backs do, and you have that read option, but if you take away the running back portion of it and you force J.T. Barrett to beat you with his legs and his arm, that's when teams typically can beat in Ohio State. That's what Iowa did. They took away Ohio State's running game, not from Barrett, but Barrett had like 63 yards on the ground that game. It was something like that. He didn't run wild, but he did so efficiently. But he had to run it like 18 times in that game, where like Dobbins and Weber, they combined for like 16, 18 carries. But so if you make J.T. Barrett beat you, even with his legs, with his arm, whatever it is, just take away what Ohio State really wants to do. And that's pummel you up front and give it to their, talented 5-star running backs and just let them, run wild on you. And then have the lead, let that defense, those pass rushers, to me, the best defensive line in college football in the last however many years, let them pin their ears back, get after the quarterback, and good luck beating Ohio State. But if you make Barrett beat you, even with his legs, not only just his arm, but just make Barrett beat you in the option game and then having to throw it once in a while, that's when you can really get Ohio State doing what they don't want to. And Michigan State obviously couldn't do that. Again, Mike Weber, 9 carries, 162 yards, 2 touchdowns. He broke off a couple long ones. It set a couple career highs in this one. But that's all I have on Ohio State, Michigan State, unless you've got anything else, Troy.
Nah, just yikers, Michigan State. But here's the thing. I don't think any less of Michigan State. I expected Ohio State to win this game. And you and I talked about it last week on the show. They got embarrassed, and it's not going to happen again. I thought Michigan State might be able to keep it a little bit closer than the score, but they are a young team. And I jokingly, and it's just everybody that listens every week knows when I yell, "Fire D'Antonio" in my crazy voice, I am 100% sarcastic, because no way in the world should you fire this guy. And a game like this is the result at the beginning of the year, Kevin, that I would have probably expected. I looked at a blowout. And when you looked at the schedule, you're saying, oh, Michigan State at Ohio State, they're not even going to be in that ball game if that's you looking at the end of August. That was me. Basically crossing that game off from Michigan State with a black permanent marker like you don't even have a chance. They went into the game, and they were just outskilled. Ohio State's a better team. I expected that this game would have been this score like in August. Now, with the way Michigan State was playing and the way fans get, now they're going to be all upset because they got pummeled. But where were your expectations back in August and September when you really wanted to fire D'Antonio and you didn't think this team could do crap? This was the outcome that you were expecting. So I guess that's where I get a little perturbed, Kevin, with fans. I understand that once the team starts doing better, that expectation should rise. But let's be real about the opponent. It was Ohio State at Ohio State. The game wasn't at Michigan State. It was at Ohio State. And so I expected Ohio State to basically run away with this game. Like I said, I thought Michigan State would be able to keep it closer in the beginning. But nah, Urban Meyer getting embarrassed, believe me, those kids knew about it. And those kids were not letting that happen again. So that's all I have.
Yeah, before I move on, like I've said before on the show, and it's been a while, but if you're a fan of a team and you watch every snap of your favorite team, you know that team better than those quote-unquote experts do. Because you just know your team better than those experts do, because those experts have to pay attention to team A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They can't watch every snap of every Iowa game. An intense Iowa fan knows their team better than any, quote-unquote expert does. You just know your team. You watch every single snap, every single Saturday. And so, again, before the year starts, it's not often that if you're a realistic fan of your team, you knew going into this year what could probably happen. It was very unlikely that Wisconsin was going to lose 3-4 games this year. It was just very unlikely. And whether you're you just have to be a realistic fan. But at the same time, like you are, Troy, with Wisconsin, you thought they weren't even a top 10 team at the start of this year. And I'm not saying that they are a top 10 team or they're not, but I don't necessarily feel any different. I mean, I feel better that Jonathan Taylor is what he is as a freshman. I wasn't expecting that, obviously, but this is basically what we've expected from Wisconsin. This is what we expected from Michigan State, was for Ohio State at home to blow out Michigan State. That was the expectation going in this year. If you're a realistic Michigan State fan, you were kind of hoping for a bowl game. Maybe the team could have done a little better and, surprise you with 7-8 wins, but that would have been great for a young team coming off a, 3-9 year, whatever it was a year ago. So, again, just like you said, Troy, you know your team and what were expectations before the year started, because that's before anything took place. And just from a talent perspective, going into this year, you knew what Michigan State was capable of going at Ohio State. It likely wasn't going to be pretty, and it wasn't. And you knew going into this year, Wisconsin had a pretty light schedule. They had a really good defense. They were going to have a strong offensive line. Hornibrook had a year under his belt, so he should, not make crazy mistakes. Wisconsin should be beating teams every week, leading up to the Big Ten title game at least. And that's what they've done. And Penn State, maybe they've underachieved a little bit by losing to Michigan State, but that's one extra loss. I mean, again, going to Ohio State, you can't fault them for that. So, yeah, they had one extra slip-up. But even at this point, they're still number 10 in the country. There hasn't been this insane surprise. I thought Michigan would be in the top 25 all year long, but even Michigan right now is 8-2, and they're all the way down there at number 24. You have to look at Michigan's schedule because it's like, well, okay, who have you beaten? You lost to Michigan State. You beat Indiana in overtime. You lost to Penn State by 29 points. So where are the key victories? They're basically nowhere. That's why Michigan's all the way down where they are.
And they happen to have all their bad luck in a few weeks in a row, Kevin. I mean, it all happened like bam, bam, bam. It wasn't spread out over the course of time. And that's why you and I were talking about it, like, whoa, Michigan, a lot of problems, defense not playing up to expectations, quarterback problems. They were still running the ball well, but all of those mishaps just happened like a domino effect, and that pummeled them, and now it puts them way back. At 8-2, what are they? Where are they? 22nd? Is that right, Kevin?
24.
24. They're 8-2. Michigan, to me, is probably a team that should be up in the teens. The problem is, with the poll and with the ranking system, when the things happen back to back to back like it did with Michigan, you're not going to get any love. And now they're playing better. Now they're climbing back up, and they'll probably finish where I think they will. Again, they got to take care of Wisconsin. They could fall out of the top 25 should they lose to Wisconsin. But, their bad luck happened all in a row, and that's why they fell. I mean, you look at the other teams like in Ohio State and the Penn State that have the two losses that are still near the top, it's because those losses were spread out. They were sprinkled in. They didn't happen, and they didn't play poor football all in a row back to back to back like Michigan did. I think that's a huge problem for Michigan. They had that little lull, and now it cost them.
Yeah. What have they done since that lull? They've beaten Rutgers, Minnesota, and Maryland. Maryland on their third-string quarterback. So you're not going to get much love, and you travel to Camp Randall, and then you have to play Ohio State the next week. Michigan's screwed, in my opinion. They're not finishing in the top 25 this year. They're going to be 8-4, in my opinion, going into the Big Ten title game. They're obviously not playing in that. Who knows what happens in a bowl game. But I guess that's why you've heard the rumors of like, okay, is Jim Harbaugh going back to the NFL? Some Michigan fans don't like Jim Harbaugh. They think they've underachieved this year. Regardless, quarterback play is certainly an issue. I guess we can jump into Michigan's game. Michigan against Maryland. We were curious going into this game how Brandon Peters would do, the redshirt freshman quarterback, and saying, hey, if this is your guy going forward, that's cool. Let's see what he does. And Michigan was up 28-0 at half. He only had to throw 18 passes. He only completed 9.
We've been curious about Brandon Peters now for 2 weeks. I'm still curious about. We'll be curious about him next week too against the Badgers. Really curious because he plays the Badgers. He might actually have to throw the ball a few times. But it's funny because we've been like, hey, let's watch this kid, and then Michigan goes out and just trounces teams that they should. I mean, they really should. Like you said, they're playing a Maryland team on their third-string quarterback. It should have been the way it was. But you never know. It's college football. Crazy things happen on Saturday.
Yeah, I didn't catch any of this game, actually, and so I don't know who this kid is from Maryland. I haven't looked at anything from this Maryland-Michigan game, realistically, up until now. But this year, this Ryan Brand kid, I guess he played some against Rutgers. I don't know if he's their fifth string because he's definitely not the fourth-string guy. He's not the top two, and that Bortenschlager guy was the third stringer. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, but I don't know who Maryland played at quarterback this week. I don't know who this Ryan Brand kid is, but regardless, Michigan's defense played well against whoever Maryland's quarterback was. Sorry, Ryan Brand, I don't know who you are at this point in time. But again, Brandon Peters, we don't know much about him. Chris Evans, the running back for Michigan, 15 carries, 80 yards, 5 yards a carry. Karan Higdon, 10 carries, 50 yards, 5 yards a carry. Michigan didn't, completely blow out Maryland in terms of what they did offensively, but defensively, I mean, a couple picks off of Brand. Lorenzo Harrison, Maryland's running back, had over 6 yards a carry, and Ty Johnson, another running back, had over 5 yards a carry. So I don't know what exactly went on there. I don't know if a couple red zone interceptions took place or what, but this is why you have to watch games realistically. I don't know why Maryland didn't score more points in this game because there were no fumbles lost, just 2 interceptions. Maryland actually outran Michigan in this game. And again, Brandon Peters threw a couple touchdown passes, but 18 attempts, 145 yards. It's not like Michigan, threw the ball left and right against them. I don't know how this ended up in 25 point.
Wow, another big score and another quarterback throwing the ball under 20 times. Unbelievable. Yeah. Just throwing it out there, Kevin. Just throwing out that magic 20 number.
Maryland also had more total yards in this game. I mean, they had 2 extra turnovers, but they led time of possession. They had more total yards. Michigan only went 4 for 11 on third downs. Maryland converted 3 of their 4 first downs or fourth down attempts. They had more passing yards. I don't know what happened in this game. Again, you can't tell everything from a box score. That's very obvious. There were no pick sixes in this game. I couldn't tell you what happened in this game, just being honest. I don't know who Ryan Brand is. I don't know how the final score was what it was because it seems like just stat-wise, Maryland did pretty well outside of 2 turnovers, and they didn't lead into, pick sixes. So I can't go in-depth about the game, but the final score is basically indicative of what we thought it would be, I think, at least.
Yeah, and I didn't get a chance to watch the game start to finish, like you said. I was tuned into a little bit of Bucky Badger. But when you look at this, and we'll preview the Badger game, this defense is bending, but it was a defense that wasn't even supposed to be bending at all, Kevin. This was supposed to be a top-notch, top 5 defense in the country. And so as a Badger fan, I get excited knowing that Maryland moved the ball against Michigan because, a Maryland offense probably, to be honest, though, might be a little better than Wisconsin's. But you look at a third-string quarterback, you got Hornibrook, but I think the Badgers' offensive line outclasses Maryland's. And if Maryland's having success against the Michigan defense, well, maybe a good Badger line could have some success against the Michigan defense. But, you never know. It's Saturday. It's college football. But Michigan, they're taking care of their cupcake games after their little lull of playing good teams. And they're going to, have a good test this weekend. But it's going to be tough. I know we're going to preview the game. But that Michigan offense against this, and I called it a super great Badger defense because it's playing super great right now, could be a long day for Peters. Could be a very long day for Peters, Kevin.
Yeah. No question about it. I'll move on to this Penn State-Rutgers game. And I could bring up the fact that of what Saquon Barkley did, which was basically nothing. But in short, Penn State wins the game 35-6 at home, like Penn State should. Rutgers was 3-3 in Big Ten play going into this one. But it's Rutgers at Penn State. You had to know that Penn State was
no shock in the
win
world
big.
Here for Rutgers. No shock in the world.
No.
I mean,
no.
Again, I'll go back. I'll make the same comment, then let you finish up and move on to the next team because I have nothing to say about this game. This is one of those games where you look at it on the schedule, you look at it in August and say, Rutgers going to Penn State, that's going to be a blowout. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Expectations through the year, whether you think Penn State has underachieved a little bit, Rutgers has overachieved, I think everyone could agree on that. Just talent-wise, before the year started, what does this game end up in? And Penn State wins by 4 scores. Northwestern, Purdue, this was our lock of the week. Again, we thought Northwestern should win this game by at least a touchdown.
Lock it up! Lock it up! Gotta love it! Yes, I get excited, Kevin. Yes, I get excited.
They win by 10. Some very interesting stats in this one. Justin Jackson, like I say every week, program's leading all-time rusher for Northwestern. 25 carries, 46 yards. Northwestern didn't do what they wanted to on the ground in this one. You look at Clayton Thorson, the quarterback, he had to throw it 46 times, almost had 300 yards passing. I think that's a good sign going forward for Northwestern that you can rely on Thorson for next year anyway. He's a junior this year. You can rely on Thorson when Jackson graduates, and you can do pretty well. I think that's Northwestern's a fringe top 25 team as a program under Pat Fitzgerald, who I love, and I just think that's what Northwestern is going forward. I don't expect too much more. I don't expect much less. I thought they would be the second best team in that division this year. And next year, I basically assume the same. I think Northwestern is going nowhere. I like what Fitzgerald does, but the other stat I wanted to bring up too was Elijah Sindelar, Purdue's quarterback, threw the ball 60 times in this game. 37 of 60, 376 yards, 2 touchdowns. They still only scored 13 points in the game. Obviously, a missed extra point took place, but 376 yards through the air, 60 attempts, you score 13 points. So absolutely nothing going on in Purdue's running game, but that's nothing different necessarily. And Purdue wants to throw the heck out of the ball. They did. They did so fairly successfully, but still only scored 13 points. Northwestern didn't do what they wanted to, and they still win the game by 10, having to throw the ball 46 times. That's all I have to really say on that one.
Yeah, I was flipping back onto this game, watching a little bit of it, and it was the passing fest, unlike traditional Big Ten football. Both teams, their front sevens, were doing what they wanted to against the opposing team's running backs, and it was a battle of the quarterback. And sometimes, and I'll tell you what, Kevin, I think a lot of fans sometimes they like that. Again, I know that I'm probably bred from a different cloth, where I can respect a good grind them out, good running attack. But every once in a while, you like when the quarterback drops back and throws the ball. But Purdue. We've talked about Purdue. They're in the stage where they need to get some recruiting classes in. They need to get a little bit better, add some more talent. Northwestern, on the other hand, was a team that we thought would be near the top of their division, which they are. We didn't think that they would be at the top because of the Wisconsin right there on top of them. But Northwestern is just now doing what they needed to do, Kevin, to basically solidify that second spot in the division. And that's where Northwestern is right now. It's just a pretty good team, not a great team, but a pretty good team. They have deficiencies in certain areas, but they are, in my mind, the second best team in that division.
Hardly agree. Indiana travels to play Illinois. They win 24-14. This was the battle of 2 winless Big Ten teams. They were the last 2. Indiana's
Lovey let me down. Lovey let me down.
I know.
You can fill the fans in that didn't listen last week's show. You can fill them in.
Did you? Oh, yeah, you thought Illinois was going to win this game, didn't you?
I thought Lovey would pull it out for me. I really did. I was on Lovey's bandwagon. Lovey, what are you doing to me? You're killing me on this show, making the old man look like he doesn't know what he's talking about. But, yeah, you're absolutely right, Kevin. This was a game, bottom dwellers, first win for Indiana. Both programs in basically complete rebuild mode. Illinois just very young. And Indiana, they've got some guys, but they just need more skill. They need some recruiting classes. But I really thought Illinois might be able to get their first win, but I was wrong.
I like Lagau as a quarterback. Completes 2/3 of his passes, 289 yards, couple touchdowns. I think I've said it all year, especially the first game of the season. You could tell Lagau was the better throwing quarterback than Patrick Ramsey. He had a day against Illinois, and Simi Cobbs had a touchdown, who's a very good receiver for Indiana. I think Indiana knows what they are, and they still ran the ball 40 times in this game. But if you're Indiana, Lagau is the better throwing quarterback for you. I know I'm 99% sure Ramsey's hurt. That's why I didn't play in this game. But Lagau likes to throw the ball. You're pretty good at throwing the football. Your defense is not terrible. I'm surprised Indiana's 4-6, 1-6 in Big Ten play. I expected more. But because, again, quarterback play is not terrible. Your wide receivers, to me, still probably the best in the Big Ten in terms of wide receiver cores. So I expected more from this Indiana team.
I think, Kevin, Indiana's problem is defensively. They need to add more players defensively. Offensively, like you said, they've got an identity. They could do some things. The problem you get, though, when you're limited in possessions, which Indiana happens to because defensively they can't get off the field. And so when you're limited in offensive possessions and you have a better than average offense, it doesn't matter. You need to have that defense that's going to give you those extra 2-3 possessions in games to win. You know, if you have 3 more possessions, you can pretty much say, well, if you can score at least 1 touchdown, that's 7. If you can get a field goal in another drive, that's 10 more points with 3 extra possessions. Indiana's not getting that. You know, their deficiencies on defense. They need to add some recruiting classes and shore up that defense because offensively, I think they've got a pretty good identity of what they want to do. I just don't think they have a defense helping out that offense. That's what Indiana's problem is.
For sure. Last game of the Big Ten from Week 11, as we're on to Week 12 now. But Week 11, Minnesota at home against Nebraska, and I didn't see any of this game either, but Minnesota wins 54-21.
Problems in Nebraska. This was a game, I'll even admit this, and if there's any Gopher fans or any Cornhusker fans listening, I didn't watch this game, didn't watch any of it because I didn't want to. I really didn't want to. It's 2 programs. Minnesota is a team, and I've apologized many times on this show because I jinxed them when they were actually playing pretty well. Then they had to get into the heart of the schedule, and they pooed the bed. Nebraska's pooed the bed from the beginning of the season. I really didn't want to watch a poo the bed game. So I had no inclination of even turning on this game for any part of it, Kevin.
Yeah, Minnesota attempted 16 passes in this game. Demery Croft, the quarterback, completed 9. They still scored 54 points. He led the team in rushing. 10 carries, 183 yards from your quarterback, 3 touchdowns. Rodney Smith, 24 carries, their main running back, 24 carries, 134 yards. Kobe McCrary, a backup running back from Minnesota, 10 carries, 93 yards, 3 touchdowns. Minnesota scored 6 touchdowns on the ground. They did whatever they wanted to, and to think that Nebraska could not stop Minnesota's running game, even though Minnesota has played below average this year, I think it goes to show what this Nebraska defense is all about, and that's why you're seeing stories left and right about people calling out their defensive coordinator, and just Nebraska defense as a whole is not not playing up to expectations, that's for sure. Whether you lose your best defensive player before the year starts or not, one player shouldn't make all this difference in the world. They would have struggled with him. And without him, they're obviously getting they can't do what they want to defensively. That's for sure.
Yeah, you know what, Kevin? If they would have had him, what is he going to make 50 tackles a game? He's going to run all over the field like Superman and just tackle everybody, and is he going to rush the passer and sack the quarterback? They got more problems than missing one guy. And if that's what, if I hear a fan of Nebraska say, "Whoa, we got injury," no, it's one guy. Where are the other 10? Are they all sitting over in the corner moping because there's an injury to your All-American? Well, come on now. That's just ludicrous. There's big problems in Nebraska. You're going to see wholesale changes after this year, and probably warranted. Because Nebraska, I thought before the year, wouldn't be this bad. I thought they'd be respectable. They're not even respectable right now, Kevin. And that's bad. If you're a coach and your team is not respectable, yeah, you're going to be on your way out. And so I'm surprised that after this game that we didn't already hear about it happening. But again, we still have an interim athletic director, and as he said, he wasn't going to make any changes. So it just surprises me that at this point, with a couple games left in the year, that they don't say adios, put somebody in there as an audition. But here's the thing. I don't think you audition anybody on that staff. I think you get rid of the whole staff. You just start over because it's bad. And I think you know me, Kevin. I'm not a guy. I'm not for firing coaches. I'm usually the guy like, oh, give them a chance. Give them a chance. It's bad in Nebraska. Get rid of the whole kit and caboodle. Just get rid of them all. Bring in fresh blood because that's what you need there.
Yeah, and Nebraska does have a new AD, and Bill Moose. We didn't necessarily talk about it on the show, but people, asking for Moose. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it, but he's quoted as saying, I think it was today, he said, "It's not like I've got a coach to hire this afternoon at 3:30. That's what he said. Sorry, this was yesterday. He said, "Mike Riley deserves to finish the 2017 season. That's how I operate. I applaud this fan base because they've been patient and they haven't had the product, at least from my observation in the short time I've been here, that I feel that they deserve. It's why we're taking a real hard look at this. And one of the reasons I am out to hear their disgruntled thoughts on the state of this program." So he knows everyone's pissed, and he knows that basically changes are going to happen, but himself believes that coaches shouldn't be fired in the middle of the season. That's basically why Riley's still here. But Nebraska will have a new head coach next year. I'm 99.9% sure of it.
I'll up you 0.1%. I'm 100% sure they're going to have a new coach next year. If I'm a new AD and I come in and my football program is horrid and there's nothing else at that school, because basketball, we talked about the basketball team on Go Big or Go Home basketball edition. It's not going to be much better. It's tough sledding there. Nebraska's football, and that's where the fan base is. If they would make the NCAA tournament in basketball, fans would be happy. They would be happy. But when their football team sucks, they're mad. The basketball team, Kevin, could go to win the Big Ten championship, and it wouldn't matter. It's not going to matter at Nebraska. They want a national championship in football. They don't care what the basketball team does, and I'm not downplaying that sport at all. I love college basketball, but that fan base wants football, not basketball, so there will be a new head coach. I'll up you 0.1%. There will be a change made. I didn't know about the new AD. I don't follow that part of it, so I apologize for that, but good for him. I mean, at least take a good, strong look at everybody on the staff. Maybe not everybody has to go, but to be honest, usually the head coach is the one that picks his staff, and this staff is just not performing.
Without a doubt. And we can move to this week's games. Saturday, November 18th. We can start with, let's see here. We'll start toward the bottom of the barrel. We'll go with Minnesota Northwestern at noon. Northwestern's at home. And Northwestern, unfortunately, because I would love to put this as a lock as well, but Northwestern's favored by 7. And Northwestern at home against Minnesota, they're going to win the football game. I would say they should be favored by at least 7 points. They're favored by 7. If it was less than 7, if it was 6.5, I'd say lock it up, take Northwestern. But at 7, yeah, you could see a 19-13 game. You could see even 21-14, 27-20, and so you're not winning any money on that. So I'm not going to say lock of the week, but Northwestern will win this football game at home against Minnesota.
Yeah, it's at home, Northwestern. I just talked about them. I think they figured some things out here late in the season, which is good for them. They can lock up that second seed in the division and, get a decent bowl game out of it. They've got some good players. You mentioned Jackson. I think he'll be able to run the ball. They shouldn't have to throw the ball as much against Minnesota. The thing is with this, it's not a lock for me either because I said it. Minnesota has the potential to play better. I mean, last week's game, I'm not watching that game. It was against Nebraska. I mean, you probably should have won that game, maybe not by that much, but Nebraska's in shambles. But it could have gave Minnesota some confidence to be able to go on the road to Northwestern and at least compete in that game. So I wouldn't lock it up either, but I think Northwestern wins at home, Kevin.
Yeah. Indiana at home against Rutgers, also at noon. Indiana's favored by 11 over a Rutgers team. Rutgers has 3 Big Ten wins. Indiana's got 1. Vegas still thinks Indiana at home is 11 points better. And I think Indiana is better. I think Indiana has underachieved. I think Rutgers has overachieved. I don't think Rutgers is a better team than Indiana, and this game should be close in terms of Vegas. I think Indiana's not going to blow them out, but I do expect Indiana to win by probably 10 points. I do expect that. So Indiana minus 11. I'm not locking one way or the other, but again, Indiana to me is the better team, despite what the records say. With both of these teams, and especially at home, I'd take Indiana to win for sure.
Yeah, Indiana's going to win this game, and this is one where I'll teeter on it a little bit, Kevin, because Indiana giving 11. Rutgers has exceeded expectations offensively, and Indiana, I just mentioned, their problem is defense. Should Rutgers get some nice long drives and keep that offense on the sideline, Rutgers could cover. But again, I'm not 100% sure with my Monopoly money. I got to get enough to buy Boardwalk, and this is more like Baltic Avenue. Where when I'm looking at the Monopoly board.
The purple piece.
I just wanted to throw it out there though that based on what I said, if Rutgers can control the clock, keep that Indiana offense on the sideline, Rutgers could cover in this. So this is one of those where I would teeter a little bit, and if you are a true betting person, take a long look at it, go back, do some more homework on it, but it might be a worthwhile at least to look at, Kevin, to say, could Rutgers cover that 11 based on some things that are going on this game, and take a real good look at that Indiana defense. And Rutgers, they could put a couple points on the board. And it all depends on how many drives and what that Indiana defense can do. Can they get off the field? Now that I've said this, that means Indiana's going to win by like 40. So, take it with a grain of salt. But based on what I've seen, I think Rutgers could make a game out of it, Kevin, but I think Indiana still ends up winning in the end. But Rutgers could cover, but I'm not locking it either.
Would agree 100%. I guess I'll save Wisconsin, Michigan for the end. But Iowa hosting Purdue, that's at 3:30 Eastern. So here, obviously, Iowa is the better team. They're at home. They should be favored to win. They are. They're favored by 8 points. It's so weird. Some of these teams, like Iowa, seeing them beat almost beat Penn State at home, and seeing them beat Ohio State at home by 31. It's like, how do you not?
You're talking in my mind right now, youngster. Do you know that? Because I know exactly where you're going with this, and that's exactly what I'm going to say. So when I'm done, I'm probably going to say no comment because the youngster said what I wanted to say. I can already tell where you're going. We've been doing shows together so long. You're going to talk through my brain right now.
It's just weird to know what Iowa is capable of, and yet still Iowa -8 against Purdue. They're the better team. They're at home. I just don't feel comfortable 100% locking it in, saying Iowa is going to beat Purdue by double digits, even though they killed Ohio State by 30, should have beaten Penn State earlier this year at home. So why would Iowa not beat Purdue by double digits? I just don't have the confidence in Nathan Stanley, and especially a week ago, I think that if Iowa plays that game closer, they're probably favored in this game by 13, 14 points. But according to what the public sees a week ago, they're seeing Iowa struggle so hard against Wisconsin. It's hard to put a huge number on Iowa, but you know what Iowa's capable of. I'm not going to lock it in. I think Iowa wins this game, favored by 8 against Purdue at Iowa. But I can't lock it because I don't trust Iowa enough to win this game by 10 or more points, 9 or more. But it's hard to win a football game by 9 points.
Yeah, I blocked the one word that you didn't say, inconsistency, and that's, you said exactly, though, what my thoughts were. You can't pick Iowa because of the inconsistency that they've had all year. They go out and play like they're a top 25 team. And you look at Wisconsin, and I give Wisconsin defense great credit. But, man, if you're a good team, you figure out a way to put some points on the board some way, somehow. They couldn't do it. They had to get defensive scores. And I've seen Iowa all year be just inconsistent. But they can look like a great team. So there you go. They can look like a great team and cover, or they can look like a crap team and actually lose the game and go from there. So you said exactly what I was thinking. Inconsistent Iowa team, you can't lock that one in. You just don't know what Iowa team's going to show up.
Yep, that's why they're 3-4 in the Big Ten. They're not this juggernaut. Penn State at home against Nebraska. Weird start time for this. It's 4 p.m. Eastern. Penn State, obviously the better team at home, favored by 26. To me, does Penn State win this game 34-10 and win by 24 points and not cover that spread? Absolutely possible. Does Penn State win the game 38-10 and cover the spread? Absolutely possible. 26 points, a very random number. It's not like Penn State's playing FCS, Southwest, that they should win the game by 50. It's still Nebraska. It's a Big Ten team. Probably not happy with getting embarrassed a week ago. So does Nebraska keep it within 26? I think it's absolutely possible. Not going to lock this, but, of course, Penn State should win the game at home.
You can't lock 26. And if you do, you got a lot bigger kahunas than I do. Even with Monopoly money, I am not locking at 26. Like you said, it can be a one-sided game and be 31-7. That's all it takes. It can be, you could be sitting there going into the fourth quarter, 31-0. Woo, gonna cover. Penn State's gonna cover, and then your second and third stringers in there, and they give up a touchdown. I mean, you have to take that into consideration when you're looking at the spread. Yeah, Penn State's going to dominate this game from start to finish, Kevin. And Nebraska can't hang with them. But at what point do they put in the second string? What point do they let the reserves go in and play? And when that happens, that you're going to probably concede some points and probably not move the ball offensively. So I can't lock in at 26 points. No way, no how. But Penn State will win this game easily against Nebraska.
Yeah. Another 4 p.m. start, oddly enough. Michigan State at home against Maryland. I have no idea who Maryland is going to throw out there as their quarterback. But Michigan State, better team at home. It seems to be the case of what it is this week. Literally, every home team this week, and we haven't gotten to Wisconsin-Michigan yet, but Wisconsin's at home. Spoiler. every Big Ten team that is better in its matchup this week, in my opinion anyway, is at home. It's a clear upset, in my opinion, if a road team wins this week. Michigan State favored by 16 at home against Maryland. Again, Michigan State could win the game 24-10, and they win by 14 points, don't cover the spread. Michigan State could win the game 28-10, win by 18 points, cover the spread. Can't lock it in for me. But, again, better team at home. Michigan State should beat Maryland.
Yeah, straight up, you're going to take Michigan State. But my problem with this, to lock in those points, is you've got a young Michigan State team. And they have clearly exceeded expectations. Good for D'Antonio. But with that spread, that large of a number, I would not even feel, again, comfortable with monopoly money going there. Just because they are young, and if there's some adversity early in this game, they may not jump out and be able to cover that whole number. But they could, because they've proved it before. But, again, with a young team that hasn't done it week in, week out, I don't feel comfortable locking in that many points.
Completely agreed. I will go to this one before Wisconsin, Michigan. Ohio State is at home against Illinois. I'll let you guess the spread, Troy. Ohio State at home against Illinois.
32.5.
Close, just not enough. Ohio State minus 41.
41?
I think it's rightfully so, though. Ohio State beat Rutgers by 56. Ohio State beat Maryland by 48. Ohio State beat Nebraska by 42. So Ohio State can't beat Illinois by 42, 48, 50 points. I think it's very possible they just beat Michigan State by 45.
Yeah, they could. That's a big, big number, though.
Yeah.
That's a big betting number.
It is. But I can't go one way or the other with this. Like any of these huge lines, it's hard to go one way or the other with. Ohio State at home against Illinois. Obviously, Ohio State should win the game. If they don't, I don't know if I will be able to do a show next week with you, Troy.
Should Lovey pull something out of his hat and win this game, there will be Gatorade showers every day after practice. They're not even on the same playing field. Now, I say 41. It should be an ease, and I know they've beaten good teams by as much, but I'm looking at it, and again, I've said this not twice. I said it with Penn State. I'm going to say it with Ohio State. You're getting, Kevin, to the end of the season. When these games start to get to the point where there is nothing left for that team to prove and the game is in balance, I think you're going to start seeing coaches pull some players so they don't get as many hits on their body. Ohio State still has stuff to play for. They've got some tough games left. Penn State still has stuff to play for. Why would they risk injury of their players when they're up by 28 points against an inferior team? So, therefore, when I'm looking at, it's not right now where Ohio State is. It's not pageant points. And what I mean by that is they don't need to go out against the committee and prove that they can beat Illinois by 56 points. They've done enough already. Now it's just about winning games. You mentioned it earlier with the football ranking. If they win out and Alabama takes care of their business, Ohio State could be in. The committee's not going to look back and say, "Oh, you only beat Illinois by 35. That wasn't good enough." They're at the point of the season now. Now, I will say this: in the beginning of the season, racking up the score and winning 52-3 for the committee, that's like eye-opening. That's like, wow. Right. We're now at the end of the season. Those points don't matter. And I would have to imagine that Urban Meyer's smart enough that if a game's in the balance, he's not going to keep Barrett in there to risk injury. He's not going to keep his guys in there to risk injury against an Illinois team, knowing that if they keep winning, an undefeated Wisconsin team is on the horizon. So that's why I can't lock in 41 points, Kevin. No way, no how.
Yeah, it's a good point you bring up, especially the game before Michigan. Ohio State 100% focused on Michigan. They know they're better than Illinois. You could see, again, like you said, you're up 28-0 at half, 31-0 at half, 34-0 at half. You take out your starters, they win the second half by a field goal even, and or a touchdown up by 31. It's still not enough to cover the spread. That's a ton of points, especially before Michigan. If you're a betting man and you go with Illinois plus 41, you go Nebraska plus 26, you go Rutgers plus 11, I don't think that's a terrible play because, again, Ohio State is better than Illinois by 41 points, absolutely. But understanding what is surrounding Ohio State.
They might be better by 56 points, Kevin. They might be better by 2 touchdowns every quarter. But like I said, there's things that I'm taking into consideration, which is the time of the year and the games that are left that are important, and injuries can derail a team just like that.
Yep, perfect point, in my opinion. We have not disagreed yet, and like I said before, I mean, the better team is just at home. It seems like every single game this week, and we'll finish with a noon start. College game day is there at Wisconsin, which is cool. Wisconsin hosting Michigan. Again, Wisconsin 10-0, Michigan 8-2. You would think this would be a pretty close game, just looking at the records going into it. Even to say that Michigan would be 8-2 at this point, that's understandable. But the way Michigan has done it, kind of questionable. The last 3 games, though, somewhat reminds me of Ohio State. Leading into the Penn State game, Michigan beat Rutgers by, and it's not as lopsided, but they beat Rutgers 35-14, beat Minnesota 33-10, beat Maryland on the road 35-10, and now you're playing Wisconsin. But so Michigan has obviously feasted on inferior competition. What do they do against Wisconsin, especially on the road? Different story, so to say, for Ohio State, Penn State, and how Ohio State racked up huge victories before Penn State. But I don't think Michigan has turned a corner. I don't think Brandon Peters has shown life that he can throw the deep ball and lead Michigan to a victory against a really good defense, really good running game, really good offensive line. I don't think that's the case here. I think Wisconsin will win the game at home. They're favored by 7.5, and that seems about right to me. I could see Wisconsin winning by a touchdown. I could also see Wisconsin winning kind of like they did against Iowa, where you shut down Michigan's running game, and it's just over because Brandon Peters isn't going to win the game, let alone keep it within a touchdown. I'd be tempted to take Wisconsin minus 7.5. Maybe if you talk me into it, Troy, but I don't think you will, just based on how you've talked about Wisconsin all year. You're not taking Wisconsin minus a huge number. This isn't, but Wisconsin in its probably most formidable opponent so far this year in Michigan in terms of talent, that's for sure. Wisconsin at home against Michigan minus 7.5. I think Wisconsin wins the game. I'm just not one to lock it in and say they're going to win by 8 or more because I know a 31-24, a 21-14, 20-13 game is very possible between these two teams.
No, Michigan's not scoring 24, Kevin. Not against this defense. And you brought up a couple things, and I'm going to tell you what, I might be able to convince you as to why Wisconsin's going to win by more than that. However, I'm a Badger fan, and based on Hornibrook, I'm never locking Wisconsin in a game with points. Never. You saw what he did against Iowa, and if he makes one bad throw against his Michigan defense, it's another pick 6. But I'm going to give you the reason why I think they can cover this. You look at how Michigan played against Maryland. Maryland won the time of possession against this so-called great defense of Michigan.
Yeah.
What can Wisconsin do with a better offensive line, a better running back, and a tremendous defense against an unproven quarterback? A quarterback that hasn't faced any adversity in the games he's played. And that's probably what Harbaugh wanted. Hey, we're going to throw you in against the cupcakes. Now you're on a stage and you're going to Camp Randall. That's the thing, Kevin. He's not playing at home against a super great defense. He's playing at Camp Randall. And when they start jumping around at the end of the third quarter, that is pretty intimidating. I don't know if you've ever been at Camp Randall when that happens, Kevin. The stadium shakes. The stadium literally shakes. You think the stadium's going to cave in. I don't know what it feels like on the field because I've never been on the field. This kid is going to be overwhelmed at Camp Randall Stadium, and he's going to be facing adversity for the first time all year. not against a piss-poor defense, against a great defense. I see disaster for Mr. Peters. I really do. And I am not talking from the heart right now as a Badger fan. I'm talking as somebody looking at the facts. He's not had to do anything the last 2 games. He's played average to mediocre defenses. They've been able to run the ball. They're not running the ball against Wisconsin. They might have some short-term success, but you're not getting a dominant Michigan team that's going to run the ball down the Badgers' throat and win the time of possession. They couldn't even do it against Maryland, Kevin. Again, my stat of the game. If Hornibrook throws the ball 20 times or more, they lose. I don't think he has to throw it 20 times. I think they're going to be able to do enough against a Michigan defense that has not met expectations. The other thing here, I think the Badgers get a lot of short fields. I think they're going to get Michigan into 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 10, and Peters is going to have to try to make a play. He's going to be intimidated. He's young, and he's going to make mistakes. That's what's going to happen. I see him throwing 2 or 3 interceptions in this game. Leads to short fields for Wisconsin. They can capitalize on a short field with Taylor in the backfield. If Hornibrook is in short intermediate situations, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, Badgers can walk away with this game, Kevin. I said it a few weeks ago. I wish they could have played Michigan then. I said Michigan's playing better because they've taken care of business against mediocre teams. Now they have a test, and the test is huge. This Badger defense, I just watch them in every week. Even last week in the boring game, that defense just amazes me. They're ball hawks. They're not one guy in the open field making a tackle, and even if it is an open field tackle, there's 2 more guys ready to knock the guy should that tackle not happen. The Badgers are a sure tackling team, and against this Wolverine team, the running backs, like I said, okay, they might break off an 8-10-yard run here and there and have some short-term success. It's not happening all game, not against this Badger defense. However, should Michigan be able to shut down Taylor and put the ball in Hornibrook's hands, which is my other side of this, then the Badgers will not cover. The Badgers could lose the game because Hornibrook is going to make mistakes if you put him into situations. And the thing with him, he's already faced adversity. And he's just not a guy that can spread the field. Everything's going to be key on what they do on 1st down. If they get into 2nd and manageable, Badgers run away with this game, Kevin. That's all I got.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I want to pick Wisconsin minus 7.5. They should win this game by at least 8 points. They really should. They are the better team. They are at home. They absolutely have something to prove. It's going to be 41 degrees. I don't expect Peters to be lighting up Wisconsin's defense. Wisconsin should win this game by at least 8 points. I just can't do it because things have to play into Wisconsin's way, and they should. But they have to in order for Wisconsin to do what they want to and have success and win by more than a touchdown.
Don't sound so sad, youngster, because I'm not locking it in either. I gave you every reason why you should. I'm not either. I told you I will never take Wisconsin in the points because the con of Hornibrook outweighs all of the things that I said. But I'll tell you what, if you listened, and you need to go back and listen, I gave you every reason why Wisconsin wins by 20.
I know.
But then you mentioned the name Hornibrook, and all of a sudden winning by 20 goes down to winning by 4. That's how critical I am of this guy because he's making silly throws. He is not able to spread the field, and that's where I'm at. So, no, don't feel bad, youngster. We have no locks this week.
We don't, but we are still 4-0. I ultimately
but we think every home team's going to win.
Yeah, it's definitely an upset if a road team wins. Hopefully it's not something insignificant like Rutgers beating Indiana, but it's a pretty big upset if a road team wins this week, especially in Vegas. If Rutgers beats an 11-point spread, that's big. But in general in terms of what it means for some of these teams. If a road team does pull an upset, it's a big upset this week in the Big Ten. Ultimately, with Wisconsin-Michigan, I'll end it with this, and then I've got nothing else to add for this show. We've gone on for probably an hour and a half now. But so I cannot take Wisconsin to win by more than a touchdown against a team that's probably equally talented as them. They just aren't playing as well and don't have the dominating running game, defense, offensive line that Wisconsin has. But talent-wise, I don't think there's much separating these teams, so I can't take Wisconsin, to win by more than a touchdown.
Neither can I. There you have it, folks. No lock on Go Big or Go Home football edition this week. And with that said, hope you enjoyed the show. And as I stated earlier, we do appreciate you listening in. Find us on Twitter at TroyRobert967, at KidCunny, KIDCUNI, and our show handle at youngsteroldman. As always, hope you enjoyed the show. Go to thegruelingtruth.net, find Go Big or Go Home basketball, find Go Big or Go Home football. You've already found it, but we've got other archive shows. Have a good day, everybody. The Youngster and I will get back with you next week.